Good morning and welcome to the August 2014 open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the agenda for what we've got this morning?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes 2 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order to streamline and update the rules governing the construction, marking, and lighting of antenna structures. These updates will improve efficiency, reduce regulatory burdens, and enhance compliance with tower painting and lighting requirements, while continuing to ensure the safety of pilots and aircraft passengers nationwide. Second, you will consider a report and order, and third, further notice of proposed rulemaking that establishes deadlines for covered text providers to be capable of delivering text to appropriate 911 public safety answering points, and seeks comment on proposals to improve text to 911 service, such as through the provision of better location information and roaming support. This is your agenda for today. Please note the consent agenda items listed in the Commission's notice on August 1st, 2014 have been deleted from today's agenda, with items 1, 3, 4, and 5 adopted by the Commission. The first item today will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Roger Sherman, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Sherman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
It's my pleasure to introduce this report and order, which is part of the Commission's ongoing process reform initiative. The order makes common sense updates to the Commission's rules regarding antenna structure, lighting, and marking, reducing regulatory burdens for tower owners while continuing to ensure the safety of pilots and passengers. I'm joined at the table today by Sue McNeil, Special Counsel for the Wireless Bureau, Paul Dari, Deputy Chief of Spectrum Policy for the Spectrum and Competition Policy Division, Michael Smith, an attorney in the Spectrum and Competition Policy Division, and John McCormick, an attorney in the Auctions and Spectrum Access Division. I would also like to thank Patty Robbins, Jeff Steinberg, Peter Trachtenberg, and Joel Gehring, all in WTB, for their help in bringing this matter to closure. In addition, I would like to thank Margaret Egler in the Enforcement Bureau for her thoughtful input based on her field experiences. Michael Smith will present the item.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioners, this morning we are pleased to present a report and order that streamlines and eliminates outdated provisions of the Commission's Part 17 rules governing the construction, marking, and lighting of antenna structures. These rule amendments are intended to help facilitate the deployment of infrastructure that supports wireless broadband service by improving efficiency, reducing regulatory burden, and enhancing compliance with antenna structure painting and lighting requirements, while continuing to ensure the safety of pilots and aircraft passengers nationwide. This report and order will exempt owners that use robust, modern monitoring systems from certain quarterly inspection requirements. This exemption will save antenna structure owners millions of dollars annually that may be used on additional infrastructure, as well as encourage other antenna structure owners to adopt these state-of-the-art systems. This report and order also bolsters the Commission's lighting outage notification requirements, standardizes repair timelines, harmonizes the Commission's requirements to maintain painting with current Federal Aviation Administration publications, and removes outdated provisions from our Part 17 rules. In addition, this rulemaking streamlines several requirements regarding the antenna structure registration process by removing conflicting or ambiguous rules. Specifically, the Commission will harmonize its rules with FAA recommendations regarding antenna structure marking and lighting specifications, construction notification requirements, and the accuracy of height and location data that antenna structure owners must provide to both agencies. In sum, this report and order furthers the Commission's ongoing efforts to facilitate the deployment of broadband infrastructure while promoting aircraft navigation safety and reducing regulatory burden. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt this report and order and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to everybody who has been involved in bringing this along. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For some time now, the wireless topics getting the most press attention tend to involve the upcoming AWS-3 and voluntary incentive spectrum auctions. We expect that these auctions will help the commercial wireless industry meet the explosive demand for mobile services. We also anticipate that the auctions will jumpstart broad-based economic growth because the wireless industry is a key driver when it comes to job creation and manufacturing. Less written about, however, are the Commission's rules concerning infrastructure deployment, such as the PAR 17 requirements for antenna tower registration and maintenance. But spectrum allocation and infrastructure policy are linked. If we want the upcoming spectrum auctions to yield the greatest benefits for mobile consumers and our economy, we must review and, where possible, streamline our infrastructure deployment policies. We must make sure that our licensees meet their public interest obligations. But our focus also should be on removing any unnecessary rules. Instead of spending finite resources on compliance with needless rules, the wireless industry and the regulators should retarget those resources on investments in improved networks that cover larger service areas. Antenna tower registration and maintenance requirements are necessary to ensure these structures do not jeopardize aviation safety, but some of these rules are decades old and are now outdated. One example is a requirement for quarterly physical inspections of tower monitoring systems, which have cost some of the larger tower companies millions of dollars each year. Advances in technology now allow for remote monitoring to ensure that those towers have the proper lighting and marking requirement by our rules. I am therefore pleased that this order will exempt tower owners from a quarterly inspection requirement if they use a network operations center-based monitoring system that is staffed with highly trained personnel who can respond to alarms 24 hours a day. Today's order also improves our lighting outage notification requirements, standardizes repair timelines, and harmonizes other maintenance requirements with current FAA guidelines. So I commend the parties, such as PCIA, for their advocacy on these issues, and I also wish to thank Roger Sherman, Sue McNeil, Michael Smith, and the other members of the Wireless Bureau who worked hard to bring forth this excellent item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
The world has gone wireless. Already in this country, we have more mobile phones than people. By the end of the decade, we expect to have as many as 50 billion devices communicating wirelessly worldwide in the Internet of Things. All of this activity on our airwaves puts a premium on spectrum. So, around here, spectrum usually gets all of the glory, but not today. Today, in this report and order, we acknowledge that wireless infrastructure is the unsung hero of the wireless revolution, because no amount of spectrum will lead to better wireless service without good and safe infrastructure. To give infrastructure its due, we streamline Commission rules governing construction, marking, and lighting of antenna structures. This clears the way for speeding our antenna structure registration process. It also clarifies the obligations of owners of antenna structures. It also harmonizes our rules with policies from the Federal Aviation Administration. And this last point is important because keeping these rules up to date helps ensure the safety of pilots and aircraft passengers nationwide. All around, these are good things. Moreover, they bring an overdue bit of attention to the nitty-gritty role infrastructure plays in making our wireless world possible. I support.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When the Commission eliminates a rule specifying that tower owners must notify the FAA about lighting outages by telephone or telegraph, you know our modernization effort is long overdue. I'm glad we're updating our rules today, especially by streamlining some of those governing towers, antennas, and other infrastructure. Spectrum policy grabs the headlines, but wireless infrastructure is no less important. No matter how much spectrum we make available, consumers won't have superior or even adequate wireless service if companies can't deploy infrastructure in a timely manner. And for far too long, the FCC's infrastructure rules have not kept pace with changes in technology. They've impeded innovation and imposed costs with few, if any, offsetting public benefits. And today's order makes some progress on this front. Hence, I'm pleased to support it. For example, we eliminate an unnecessary mandate by determining that tower owners that use advanced monitoring systems in network operations centers need not conduct quarterly in-person tower inspections. Now, this is a needless requirement that has cost one company alone $9.8 million since 2007. By getting rid of outdated regulations like this, we enable infrastructure providers to focus less on jumping through pointless regulatory hoops and more on meeting consumers' growing demand for wireless services. But there's much more work to be done. In 2012, I called upon the FCC to streamline and reform our rules governing the deployment of wireless infrastructure. And then, in a unanimous vote last year, we announced a comprehensive review of all of our wireless infrastructure rules. We teed up issues like small cell deployments, distributed antenna systems, the use of local moratoria, and improvements to our shot clock rules, reforms that are beyond the scope of today's narrower order. Now is the time to complete that review and to update our rules in a comprehensive way. We need to remove barriers to infrastructure investment so that America can continue to lead the world in wireless. I look forward to working with my colleagues to make that happen. Thanks to the Bureau for their fine work on this item, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to consider this item to streamline and harmonize the Commission's antenna structure rules with those of the Federal Aviation Administration. Despite the clear benefits of updating these rules, today's order has been in the works for a long time. In fact, this issue was first raised in 2005 during the Commission's own 2004 biennial review, and subsequently in a petition for rulemaking filed in 2006. The question that has to be asked is, why did it take 9 years to get this item before the Commission for a vote? We simply must do better. I applaud the Chairman for moving these backlog proceedings during his time at the Commission. Additionally, we were able to come to agreement on the scope of delegated authority provided to the Bureau to update rules to reflect future FAA antenna structure requirements. The end result ensures that non-substantive and editorial changes can be made at the Bureau level, but all other decisions would come to the Commission for consideration. It is a reasonable compromise. I thank the Chairman for incorporating my edits and the staff of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau for their work on this item. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. As you have heard everybody talk about today, infrastructure is what it's all about. And this common sense proposal has been languishing for almost a decade until Diane Cornell and her process reform task force discovered it, dusted it off, and enabled it to be with us today. It makes sense. Better than that, it's common sense. So thank you to the Wireless Bureau, Roger, Sue, Michael, Paul, Jonathan, and everybody else who has participated in bringing this forward. Thank you to Diane and her task force. There will be more of these kinds of streamlining initiatives forthcoming. So with that, I will call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you very much to the Bureau for all of your activities. The request that you made for editorial privileges is granted. And Madam Secretary, will you lead us to the next act?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the last item on your agenda will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. It is entitled Facilitating the Deployment of Text to 911 and Other Next Generation 911 Applications.
Thank you very much. Admiral, are you driving this morning?
Yes, sir. I am. Actually, David is at the helm, and I've got the con.
David is at the, you've got the, spoken like a true Navy guy. I got the con. Okay, David, over to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Chairman Wheeler and Commissioners. Today we present a second report order and third further notice of proposed rulemaking that advances the Commission's core mission of promoting safety of life and affirms the Commission's commitment to ensuring access to emergency services for all Americans. Communication networks and services regularly migrate to newer technologies, and consumers' habits change. Today's item ensures that the changes that have resulted in wide use of texting as a primary communications tool will also preserve consumers' access to critical life-saving services. Mobile wireless communications play a central role in the day-to-day lives of Americans, with a good deal of daily mobile usage centered around texting. I believe my own family is representative of many. My daughters will not answer my phone calls.
I'm sorry, we can't deal with those kind of personal issues here.
But they will immediately answer a text.
Oh.
It's just a reality. Despite the evolved nature of how consumers communicate, the Bureau's analysis finds that in most parts of our country, if you send a text message to 911 during an emergency, it won't be received. And if you are one of the tens of millions of Americans with a hearing or speech disability, the absence of text to 911 capabilities significantly constrains your ability to get help wherever you are. With full implementation of this order, texting can provide a critical means of contacting 911 when a voice call may place someone in danger, such as in an active shooter or domestic abuse situation. Very recently, a woman in Bartholomew County, Indiana, after being threatened and prevented from leaving her home by her boyfriend, was afraid to make a voice call to 911. She texted instead and successfully summoned police to intervene. This is one of the many emerging text to 911 success stories that are today preventing bad situations from becoming tragic. Stories such as this one are possible because the four major wireless carriers took action on their voluntary commitment to implement text to 911. On May 15th, they reported that they had completed the work they agreed to with NENA and APCO. Since then, an increasing number of public safety answering points, or PSAPs, have requested that these carriers send 911 text. Today, approximately 121 PSAPs in 18 states are accepting text to 911 from these carriers. According to text to 911 technology vendors, several hundred more PSAPs are already in the process of deploying text to 911 in the very near term. Today's item leverages the success of the carrier NENA-APCO voluntary commitment and establishes a basic set of requirements for stakeholders in industry and the public safety community that will ensure all covered text providers become text capable by the end of this year and begin meeting PSAP requests for service in 2015. It codifies the achievement and establishes a clearly defined on-ramp for the remaining text message service providers. With this certainty, states and local jurisdictions can more effectively plan and fund implementation for PSAP's text 911 service. Clear benchmarks and an operational framework provide a flexible path that acknowledges the investment and work by the four major carriers, but places the onus for interconnecting to the existing carrier text to 911 capabilities on the over-the-top providers, and establishes a process to ensure that as text messaging evolves, the ability to use it to access 911 evolves with it. We additionally propose an effort to work with the 911 stakeholders to generate efficiencies. Let me close with thanks to the Jefferson Parish, Louisiana PSAP Director, Ronnie Hofield. Earlier this week in New Orleans, I met with him and his talented staff. They have a superb call center and dispatch operation with highly integrated tools enabling his uniformed PSAP team to serve first responders and to be first responders. They have completed all the work necessary to support Text 911 and are ready to go live after completing their checkout and training in the upcoming weeks. I applaud their leadership on this. They put their most experienced veteran, Charlene Stein, on the transition task. Originally, Charlene just so happened to be the biggest skeptic of text to 911. Having led their integration project, she is now their biggest proponent. She gets it. The excitement in Charlene's voice was clearly evident as she demonstrated to me not only the successful completion of calls to 911 using text, but the potential to actually improve some aspects of their interaction with the public they serve. This is the innovation, spirit, and determination that will lead us not only to the benefits of text to 911, but will ultimately lead us to the full realization of next-generation 911 capabilities. Today's item represents significant effort by Bureau staff, and we appreciate the coordinating efforts of many people throughout the Commission. I'd like to give special thanks to our Deputy Bureau Chief, David Firth, as well as Erica Olson, the Bureau's Senior Legal Advisor, Nikki McGinnis, Dana Zellman, David Seal, Tim May, and Eric Ehrenreich in our Policy Division. I also want to thank Henning Schulzerin, our Chief Technologist, Karen Peltz-Strauss, and Cheryl King in the Disability Rights Office of the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau, Chuck Needy in the Office of Strategic Planning, Michael Jansen and Brian Reagan in the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and Bill Richardson in the Office of General Counsel. Normally, it's the tradition to have the junior person who worked on an item present the item. But today, with the importance of this item, we bring in a real veteran, David Seal. I want to point out that this year marks David's 30th year in the service to the Commission. As an attorney advisor, David has provided invaluable legal expertise, first as a legal advisor to the admin law judges, and then across the Commission, Competition Bureau, Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and since 2006 with Public Safety. Throughout, David has been the resident senior expert on all matters 911. David's comprehensive understanding of the Commission's rules and regulations in all areas, coupled with his E911 expertise, location accuracy, next generation 911, text to 911, and access to those services for persons with disability, has been an invaluable contribution to ensuring that the Bureau provides the Commission with the best guidance and recommendations for preserving public safety on this item. I would be remiss, however, if I didn't point out that David's most relevant and important fact is that he started his career in the U.S. Navy as an intelligence and assistant operations officer serving on board the mighty nuclear frigate, the USS Bainbridge. David, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Admiral Simpson. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Bureau is pleased to present a second report in order and third, further notice of proposed rulemaking in the Commission's Text to 911 and Next Generation 911 dockets. The second report in order requires all commercial mobile radio services, CMRS providers, and interconnected text providers, collectively covered text providers, to support text to 911 and deliver 911 text to requesting PSAPs, while the third further notice seeks comment on proposals for further enhancements to text to 911 services as technology evolves and improves. Today's order requires all CMRS providers and other providers of interconnected text messaging applications to be capable of supporting text to 911 service by December 31, 2014. By this text-capable deadline, covered text providers must take preparatory measures necessary to provide text to 911, including, for example, 1, identifying the method of delivery, 2, identifying and or entering into any necessary contractual arrangements, and 3, implementing budgetary plans necessary to provide for delivery of text to 911. The rules adopted in this order apply to all CMRS providers as well as providers of interconnected text messaging services, that is, services that enable consumers to send text messages to and receive text messages from text-capable U.S. telephone numbers. The order does not require provision of text to 911 by non-interconnected text providers, mobile satellite system providers, in-flight text messaging service providers, and IP relay service providers. Also, the order does not require delivery of 911 text messages that originate from Wi-Fi only locations or that are transmitted from devices that cannot access a CMRS network. Once covered text providers have met the December 31, 2014 deadline for text capability, they will have until June 30, 2015, or 6 months from the date of a valid PSAP request, whichever is later, to implement text to 911 for that PSAP. PSAPs and covered text providers may mutually agree to an alternative time frame without the need to obtain a waiver from the Commission. The order provides for the Commission to establish a centralized database through which PSAPs may register and provide notice that they are text ready. The second report and order adopts a technologically neutral approach and does not mandate any particular model for implementing text to 911. With respect to interconnected text providers, the order anticipates that many will choose a CMRS network-based solution to deliver text to 911, at least as an interim measure. To facilitate the use of this method, the order requires that CMRS providers allow access to their SMS networks, but it does not obligate CMRS providers to reconfigure their SMS networks. In addition, CMRS providers may migrate from SMS to new text technologies, provided the new technology continues to support text to 911 for their subscribers. The companion third further notice of proposed rulemaking seeks comment on proposals for further enhancements to text to 911 service as improved and future technologies are implemented. Current SMS technology is capable of routing emergency text to the appropriate PSAP, but does not provide enhanced location information with the text. The further notice proposes that covered text providers be required to deliver enhanced location information consisting of the best available location that can be obtained from an available location technology no later than 2 years from the effective date of final rules. The further notice also proposes that covered text providers be required to support roaming for text to 911 no later than 2 years from the effective date of final rules. The further notice seeks comment on these proposals, as well as the potential cost and the feasibility of the proposed timeframes for implementation. Finally, the further notice seeks comment on the capabilities of future texting services and on whether the Commission should extend text to 911 requirements to additional services. The further notice seeks comment on the potential to deliver 911 text messages over Wi-Fi only networks and through the use of non-interconnected text applications, real-time texting, and telematic services. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for the many years of leadership that you have provided to this agency and the American people.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Helen Keller once said, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." When you step away from all of the technical details, this item is simply about relevant stakeholders putting that principle into action. The ability to send messages, photos, and video clips, as well as other innovations in broadband technologies, can improve 911 communications for all Americans. Text messaging plays a vital role in protecting life and property when making a call is either dangerous or impossible due to transmission problems. This technology enables the more than 40 million Americans with hearing and speech disabilities to use their mobile phones to effectively access emergency services. Without text to 911, they may possess the ability to make the call, but remain unable to express what type of help they need. This is why the Commission has been trying for several years now to promote the deployment of text to 911 and other next-generation technologies. The reality is that the wireless industry and public safety agencies have found it difficult to deploy these advanced communication services. The first substantial breakthrough occurred, however, in December of 2012, thanks to industry collaboration. The 4 nationwide carriers The wireless carriers agreed to deploy text to 911 on a nationwide basis by May 15th of this year. That agreement helped accelerate progress to more than 90% of the nation's wireless customers. The wider availability of these services is also spurring public safety answering points, or PSAPs, to upgrade their networks so they can adopt text to 911 messaging abilities. It is great to see these entities, like Intrado and Telecommunications Systems, work closely to help PSAPs deploy more text to 911 services. We build on that momentum from that 2012 voluntary commitment with this item. The order makes clear that text to 911 benefits should extend to consumers of all CMRS providers, as well as those of certain interconnected over-the-top text messaging services. We are able to take this significant action thanks to the fact that several companies are currently sending text messages using SMS-based protocols routed over the underlying carrier's SMS network. In the further notice released in January of this year, we expressly sought comment on the technical details about the various approaches over-the-top service messages can use to send text messages. Several companies offering this service supported the technology-neutral approach that the Commission adopts today. They also asserted that it is technically feasible to set December 31st, 2014 as the deadline for over-the-top message services to comply with the text to 911 mandate. I am pleased to see that the Commission also established a centralized database through which PSAPs may register as text ready and notify all relevant covered text providers of their ability to accept text. This approach can help facilitate wider deployment of text to 911 networks. The further notice asks important questions about promoting the delivery of these messages through more advanced technology. It seeks to comment on a proposal to require enhanced location accuracy information when a 911 text is delivered. It also asks technical questions about delivering these messages over Wi-Fi only networks and telematic services. But when I left the building last night, Mr. Chairman, I was prepared to enthusiastically support this item, but this morning I'm troubled by one aspect of an 11th hour proposal that would direct the Communication Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, or CISRIC, to form a task force that would inquire into a number of issues. I agree that it is appropriate to form a task force to examine the structure and architecture of our nation's PSAPs and determine whether there are ways that PSAPs could promote efficiency of operations, safety of life, and cost containment. I must dissent, however, from the proposal that came to my attention less than 2 hours ago, that the task force inquire into whether states, tribal, and local entities that divert E91 funds should be ineligible to participate on various FCC councils, committees, and working groups. Doing so unnecessarily prejudices the issue and creates avoidable friction with our state partners that I worked for many years as a former joint board chair to improve. However, today I commend those parties who have been working constructively with the Commission staff and relevant stakeholders over the years. Your collaboration is vital to a successful transition to next generation 911 technologies, and I also would like to thank Admiral Simpson, David Firth, Nicole McGinnis, Tim, May, and the other members of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for working so diligently on this item. And I join you, Mr. Chair, in wishing Mr. Seal a happy anniversary. What a fine way for all of us to celebrate with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Roswurzel.
So earlier this week in New Orleans, I had the chance to help the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials mark their 80th annual conference. So it turns out the FCC is not the only 80-year-old on the block. Now, speaking directly to first responders about 911 brings into sharp focus the importance of our nationwide emergency number. So does traveling around the country and talking directly to public safety officials on the front lines. I'm proud to say I have been in 911 calling centers from Arkansas to Alaska, from New York to Nevada, from California to Colorado, and many, many more places in between. Every visit is striking because emergency operators amaze. When crises mount and calls come tumbling in, they answer their phones with steely calm and help ensure that help is on the way. Every visit also reminds me that the ways we communicate are changing. It was not that long ago that emergency calls to 911 came only from landline phones. But over time, we expanded 911 service to mobile phones. We also made 911 an essential feature of interconnected VoIP service. So times change, technology marches on, and we find new ways to bring the ways we communicate into the 911 fold. That is what we do here with texting. Texting, after all, has become second nature to millions of Americans, especially young people. Many of us use our phones more for texting than for speaking. We use texting to reach out to friends and family, to confirm our plans, to vote in contests online and on the air, and to contribute to charities and campaigns. That is why I support the effort today to codify policies to make sure that providers of text messages have systems capable of supporting text to 911 service. This means that texting services that have become so essential to so many of us can be there when we reach out in crisis. Now, I know how critical these services can be because I know texting to 911 can save lives. It already has in Vermont, where I had the privilege of seeing the service in action in Burlington. In addition, I know that texting to 911 can be a game changer for those who are deaf or have speech difficulties. In fact, I had the privilege of seeing this up close, just up the road in Frederick, Maryland, where the service is available and where the Maryland School for the Deaf is located. I also know, however, that texting to 911 can bring new complications because, let's be frank, voice calling still offers a speed and response that is superior to texting. As countless public safety officials have told me, it offers the ability for conversation that a drop-down menu of responses to an emergency text does not. So educating the public matters. I hope all stakeholders will work together on outreach because in times of crisis, we all need to understand the best way to call for help. While we look to the future with texting, there are other 911 issues that require our attention too. Today, more than 70% of 911 calls are made from wireless phones. That is more than 400,000 calls across the country every day. And this number is only going to grow because for roughly 2 in 5 households right now, their wireless phone is their only phone. Here in the District of Columbia, that number is even larger, at 1 in 2 households. Despite this nationwide change in calling practices, our rules that provide first responders with information about where we are when we call 911, well, they're stranded in the last century's calling practices. They help first responders find you when you call from a landline phone. They assist first responders with locating you when you call from a wireless phone outdoors. But if you call from a wireless phone indoors, I'd recommend you hope and pray, because no location accuracy standards apply. This gap needs attention, because when you call for emergency help, above all else, you want first responders to find you. To close this gap, I think we should start with the 4 essential principles that public safety officials, equipment manufacturers, and wireless carriers have come together to support. Efforts must be dispatchable, verifiable, flexible, and deployable in reasonable time. I believe this is a strong foundation for improving wireless 911 location accuracy and finally fixing this problem. But back to texting. ICYMI, we update our rules today, we modernize our policies, and we lay the foundation for making texting to 911 more widely available. So this has my support.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we certainly agree with your observation on location. Appreciate the 4 points that you have enumerated and worked out with the various players. And as you know, we have a proceeding underway to deliver on that. Commissioner Pai.
The FCC has no higher purpose than promoting the safety of life and property through the use of communications. It's a goal Congress established for us in the very first section of the Communications Act. And it's one I've taken seriously during my time on the Commission. It inspired my inquiry earlier this year to ensure that whenever someone calls 911, he or she reaches emergency personnel. And thanks to the tireless efforts of Hank Hunt, Mark Fletcher, and many others in our nation's lodging industry, we are starting to see real progress in connecting those in need with those who can help. One of the things I've learned from this inquiry is that there can be tragic consequences when 911 technologies do not match up with consumer expectations. Unfortunately, that's the case with today's order. It encourages the public to dive into text to 911 functionality when in reality, there's hardly any water in the pool. Because I believe the order is sure to result in massive consumer confusion and therefore will endanger rather than advance public safety, I respectfully dissent. The feel-good headlines following the decision will no doubt lead consumers to believe that they can now text 911. Just look at what has already happened. Jimmy Kimmel recently informed millions of viewers that, thanks to the FCC, text to 911, quote, should be accessible everywhere by the end of the year. And Jimmy Fallon recently told Tonight Show viewers that the FCC, quote, rolled out a new service that lets people text 911 for help. Now, there are countless reasons why all of this media coverage, and the coverage that will follow today's action, is and will be misleading at best. Let me start with a fact that is mentioned nowhere in this order. Less than 2% of our nation's 911 call centers, known as Public Safety Answering Points, or PSAPs, accept text messages. 2%. So, in your moment of need, if you try texting 911 in over 98% of the country, you won't reach emergency personnel no matter what application you use. Nothing in this order will change that fact anytime soon. The order claims that PSAPs are not accepting texts because the FCC has not required carriers to deploy it. But this assertion does not stand up to scrutiny. Currently, the 4 largest wireless carriers make text to 911 service available to over 90% of our nation's wireless consumers. So the bottleneck clearly isn't the private sector. Even in the few areas where PSAPs are accepting texts, there's no guarantee. For instance, if your phone is roaming, text to 911 won't work. If your device happens to be in Wi-Fi only mode, our rules won't apply. If you have a data plan that allows you to text but no SMS subscription, your text to 911 won't go through. If you haven't agreed to let a texting app access your phone's location information, your text will fail. And today's mandate doesn't even cover some of the most popular and growing texting apps, like WhatsApp. So if you try to text 911 using those apps, you won't reach first responders anywhere in the country, regardless of your phone's settings. Put simply, we are adopting today a patchwork approach that exposes consumers to numerous pitfalls. When a domestic violence victim is desperate, when someone who is deaf or hard of hearing is in need, we can't expect them to navigate the intricacies of these rules, to somehow intuit the precise operating mode of their phone, or to know whether their app is interconnected as defined in the FCC's rules. Indeed, the Commission itself has recognized that confusion about text to 911 will harm consumers. And that's why we adopted bounce-back rules just last year, to mitigate consumer confusion. Now, to be sure, we need to keep our 911 rules current with changes in technology and consumer usage. But we must do so guided by a fundamental principle that dates back to the Hippocratic era. First, do no harm. This order doesn't meet this standard. How many Americans will waste precious seconds during an emergency attempting in vain to text 911 because of it? Seconds that could make all the difference. I fear the answer will be too many, but frankly, just one is too many. Another casualty of this order, and an ironic one, is that it will delay, if not disrupt, the pro-consumer transition of public safety technology from SMS to NG911. Now, Next Generation 911 is not based on SMS, but rather the Internet Protocol, or IP. And by allowing IP-based text messaging, NG911 will genuinely benefit consumers. NG911 systems are built with redundancy in mind, and the use of IP allows widespread interoperability. NG911 will have built-in capabilities that will allow all consumers, including those with speech or hearing disabilities, to have reliable, real-time text communication with emergency responders. In short, NG911 is truly a life-saving advancement, and that's why Congress, public safety organizations, and industry alike have all urged the Commission to focus its efforts on accelerating the deployment of NG911, the public safety component of the overall IP transition, a cause that is close to my heart. Now, by contrast, SMS has inherent limitations that, for 911 purposes, render it inappropriate for anything other than an interim stopgap measure. SMS messages can be delayed, they can be lost, or they can be delivered out of sequence. I've experienced that when I send SMS messages, and I'm sure many of you have as well. Now, these limitations might not matter for everyday communications, but they can have serious consequences when it's an emergency, when it counts. Indeed, the FCC's own Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, or CSRIC, highlighted SMS's limitations in detail at the beginning of our rulemaking process. CSRIC observed back then that, quote, there remains disagreement about whether this method of access should even be considered for 911 because of its unreliability and other factors. Commenters have told us that the same is true now. Small wonder, then, that when we launched this proceeding in 2011, we did so with the clear purpose of accelerating the development and deployment of NG911. For we knew even then that SMS-based text to 911 was an unsatisfactory legacy technology that would not be part of the IP-based NG911 world. But where have we ended up today? Well, we've lost sight of the forest for the trees. The order says little about the NG911 transition and does even less to advance it. Instead, it attempts to construct a detailed text to 911 regime based entirely on the old legacy SMS network. And the proposed rulemaking portion of the order compounds this error by seeking comment on how we can graft additional and even more detailed requirements onto the SMS network. This won't serve consumers well. For the record shows that diving down this rabbit hole will only impede the NG911 transition. As one commenter put it, this approach takes industry off the path to NG911. Another said that requiring carriers to divert resources in this manner will only serve to delay the deployment of next-generation emergency services, including robust text-to-911 service. The National Emergency Number Association echoed these concerns, observing that solutions premised on legacy network elements and concepts will not form part of the long-term NG911 ecosystem. In short, this order will serve to frustrate, not further, the deployment of NG911, a 21st century public safety technology that actually will enable reliable text and multimedia messaging. Now, consumer confusion and delay of NG911 aren't the only flaws in the order. The cost-benefit analysis is another. It overstates the benefits by assuming that text to 911 is currently available nationwide. something we know that is not the case. On the other side of the ledger, the analysis does not account for the tragic costs that will result from consumer confusion. Nor does it contain any discussion of the costs interconnected app providers will incur as a result of the order's approach, which requires them to use and pay for access to other companies' software and networks. Additionally, this order leaves far too many technical questions, some of them quite fundamental, unanswered. For example, who is responsible for transmitting bounce back messages to consumers now that over-the-top or OTT apps will be invoking the device's native SMS software? Is it the OTT provider or the wireless carrier? Will any reply messages from a Peace app be delivered to the OTT app, or will it go instead to the device's native text messaging app? Will consumers sending a 911 text from their OTT app really need to press send twice, as the item suggests, once when they use the OTT app and a second time when the app invokes the native SMS? Will the FCC allow a migration from SMS to IP-based messaging if the only feasible method for delivering OTT texts relies on the SMS network? This decision offers no guidance at all on these and many other technical issues, and we can't step away from them. Moreover, the order's legal foundation is flawed. To highlight just one issue, it nowhere explains the statutory basis for the mandate that third-party apps be given access to a phone's SMS API. Now, the SMS API is a set of instructions that tells the phone how software components should interact with each other. That is installed by the phone's manufacturers, not by wireless carriers. So how do we have the authority to mandate that an app developer get access to a manufacturer's software? Once again, too, process concerns raise themselves. As Commissioner Clyburn pointed out, it is not optimal, to say the least, when serious and substantive changes to the item are made with little notice to the floor and with no opportunity for public input. Finally, the order penalizes the 4 nationwide wireless operators who volunteered to develop a text-to-911 solution without a mandate. This decision rewards those voluntary efforts that we should be encouraging with strict regulatory mandates and the cold comfort that those new rules are generally consistent with their existing voluntary deployments. And in this, as in other areas, the message to companies under the FCC's purview is clear. It doesn't matter how well you behave or what commitments you voluntarily undertake. There will be no escape from the FCC's regulatory playground. Now, when it comes to public safety, we all share the goal of making 911 more effective, responsive, and accessible to every American. And I do not for a minute question the sincerity of those supporting this order. But adopting new rules that will confuse consumers during emergencies, that will delay the NG 911 transition, that will leave many key questions unanswered, that undermines this goal. And for all these reasons, I respectfully dissent. But I would like to conclude with a point that I hope will unite supporters and opponents of this item. It's a message that I personally have heard from public safety officials all across this country, from Fairfax County, Virginia, to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to Anchorage, Alaska. And it's one the American people need to hear. If you need to reach emergency personnel, call 911 if you can. Calling 911 is the most reliable means to reach someone who can help. Calling 911 is the best way to supply first responders with accurate information about your location. And calling 911 is the method most likely to give first responders the situational awareness that can help to save your life. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a longer statement for the record, but I'm going to be brief as best I can. Last week, I visited New York City's bustling public service answering point, which serves a population of 8 to 11 million, depending on the time, and handles over 8 million calls a year. I commend the City of New York for bringing such disparate units under one roof to improve coordination, enhance public safety, and reduce costs. And I thank the staff for answering my many questions. Here's just one lesson learned from my visit. If you expect public safety officials to perform at their best during catastrophes, the facility better account for the needs of the dedicated public servants to stay on the job hour after hour. In the rush to open the building, the architects forgot to account for the basics. They didn't build enough bathrooms, and there are no sleeping facilities. The Commission seems to be making a similarly hasty decision here with this item. Successful technology development involves in-depth analysis and planning, software design cycles, and rigorous testing. Some, however, appear completely comfortable in placing blind faith in artificial deadlines. The theory seems to be, if we mandate it, the technology will come. Technology development, however, cannot be premised on a 1980 Kevin Costner movie about baseball. Another overarching concern of mine is the Commission's pursuit of a regulatory scheme that presents private sector participants the choice of either voluntarily implementing someone's preferred policy or facing onerous regulation. With all due respect, this regulatory seesaw is problematic. Conceptually, it is inherently unfair to have the heft of the federal government on one side of the seesaw. Where is the voluntary part of this equation? Even more worrisome, in those instances where voluntary agreements were reached, the goalposts were moved to justify imposing rules on the participating industry. Here, the large wireless carriers rose to the challenge and voluntarily enabled text to 911. But that did not free them from regulation. It may be hard finding companies to play this game in the future. In this item, the Commission also extends the text to 911 requirements to smaller CMRS carriers. I find the arbitrary compliance deadlines troubling, especially for SMS technology, which was never intended to be secure communications platform. Although this is not my preferred approach, I will concur with this portion of the order pertaining to CMRS providers. What I'm unable to support are the mandates imposed on interconnected text providers. I oppose the efforts to pigeonhole these apps into the CMRS PSAP paradigm, especially based on dubious legal authority. It has been clear since the NPRM was issued that technological solutions for interconnected text apps were uncertain. Yes, we were able to draw the schematics of how it might work on napkins, but 3 of the 4 supposed options do not exist. When looking at the one available approach, a model tied to requiring access to the CMRS network, I had a series of questions about how the technology and regulations would work. Unfortunately, I couldn't get consistent answers in which I could place any confidence as to their accuracy. The prudent approach would have been to hold back on this portion and address it when this technology was tested and when other models were available. The phrase, perfection is the enemy of good enough, has been recently used, and it makes me cringe to think our work should be measured as just good enough. Don't we owe the American people more than good enough? Good enough seems particularly perilous when talking about emergency communications. And we are partly to blame for increasing consumer expectations that text to 911 is available via all communications platforms. Let me be clear. It is not and will not be for the foreseeable future. Today, as my colleague pointed out, less than 1.8% of PSAPs, I guess the number is, I had 118, but it's 121, of the approximately 6,800 PSAPs can receive text messages. If people just happen to live in the other 98.2% of America, they are out of luck. Additionally, text to 911 is not available if you use non-interconnected text apps. We have not required it, and I don't think we should do so on closed systems. I must also dissent on the further notice. It prematurely proposes to adopt enhanced location and roaming support requirements and seeks comment on expanding text to 911 on other texting services. Take, for instance, the portion on delivering enhanced location information by text providers in a short time frame. NENA states in its comments that a commission mandate for enhanced text location capabilities would, at this juncture, be premature. But the further notice concludes and endorses adoption within a 2-year time frame and then seeks comment on such a mandate. I am equally disturbed by the notion that the Commission could require that consumers' privacy settings be completely overridden to enhance location detection. Lastly, as my colleague pointed out, the so-called cost-benefit analysis contained in this item is seriously flawed. The item is full of conjecture and assumptions on CBA instead of credible facts and data. Further, we do not consider many of the cost or repercussions of our actions. For instance, will innovation in OTT texting be stifled? Will interconnected text providers convert their offerings to non-interconnected platforms? Will the costs end free OTT text apps? And is the cost worth it when NG 911 communication systems are coming online soon? Although I disagree with the majority of today's item, I thank the Commission staff for their efforts and the Chairman for the dialogue on this topic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Commissioner O'Reilly. You know, as everybody has talked about, there are almost 2 billion text messages sent through carrier-based SMS services every year, and billions more sent through over-the-top. As we graphically heard from the Simpson family example, texting is now as important a function on a mobile device as talking. And some of those text messages are cries for help. And some of those cries for help are from individuals who can't hear or speak. Yes, call 911 if you can. But if you can't, what are you going to do? I remember a meeting with a young deaf woman who told the story of her sister having a seizure, and she couldn't call 911 because she could neither hear nor speak, and she was alone. She fortunately had the presence of mind to text her mother at work. And fortunately, her mother looked at the text message quickly and called 911. Or there's the story of the caller in Collier County, Florida, a woman who called 911 3 times, but because of the physical impairment that she was having that was threatening her life, she could not speak. 3 times she called them, and 3 times she could not get the words out. So she, in an amazingly calm moment, texted, "Help me," to 911, and the first responders came and saved her. Fortunately for this lady, as for others, she was using a mobile carrier who was voluntarily participating in the text to 911 effort. And I agree with my colleagues here in saluting those 4 national carriers who stepped up and who said, we're going to do the right thing. But unfortunately, a lot of time has passed since those carriers stepped up and did something voluntarily, and the other carriers serving the consumers of America did not. Now, the regulatory seesaw says, okay, step up. If you can do it, that's terrific. But if you don't step up to your responsibility, we will. The message here is to carriers is that the voluntarism was fabulous. The way the 4 picked up on it was terrific. The way the others ignored it has then forced us to go across the entire industry. This item also addresses the rapidly expanding set of over-the-top text services, like Apple Messages that's on 300 million iPhones, and Text Free, an app that's on 10 million phones. In an emergency, a text message for help is a text message for help. A person in a crisis shouldn't have to worry about whether their text message is on the carrier or some over-the-top service. But there's a challenge that we face, and that's because some over-the-top services are IP-based rather than interconnected with the carrier's SMS-based service. There are technical issues to overcome, and that's why we're issuing a further notice on this topic. But the first step is that all carriers and all interconnected SMS texting applications should be covered, and that's the step that we take today. I was reminded as I was listening up here of the observation that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I guess we could sit here and wait until everything is worked out. I guess we could sit here and wait until the all IP next generation 911 calls. But if one life is one too many, as we have heard today from this dais, what are we going to explain to that life or to his or her relatives? That we just figured we'd sit here and wait till the best of all possible worlds was possible. We're not doing that. I agree with the observation, by the way, that the PSAPs have a genuine and important responsibility that they need to step up to. And I guess I really should address those comments to the people who fund the PSAPs. Because every one of us as Americans sees on our bill a line item that says 911 fees. We're paying for the best iteration that technology can deliver on our bills. And those who collect those funds need to direct those funds to deliver on those expectations. This is far from a playground. This is about people's lives. This is about the expectation that our first responsibility is to provide for the safety of Americans. And this is a step to continue to fulfill that responsibility, and it is not the final step. Now, let me just hit pause there for a second and respond to another issue that's been raised here, just for the record and so everybody can understand. I think the point that Commissioner Clyburn made about process is an incredibly valid point. It's one that we've heard from this dais multiple times. It is a bipartisan issue. And it is a bipartisan offenders issue where individual commissioners are not able to engage until the 11th hour, thereby thrusting other commissioners into difficult situations. As I say, everybody up here has complained about it, and it's a bipartisan trigger on this. It's something that we have to come to grips with. And it's something that I think we owe it to each other to do. So, let's return to the specifics of this item and call for the vote All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. The request for editorial privileges is granted. Madam Secretary, would you take us to the next step, please?
Okay, it is time for announcements.
Thank you. Any commissioners have announcements? Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to take this time to acknowledge and express my appreciation for the summer 2014 class of law clerks in my office as we close out the term. Adrian Pegues, who is a 3L at the University of South Carolina Law School, my alma mater, well, undergrad anyway. Laura Arcapani, I can never say her name, Arcapani, a 3L at Villanova University Law School. I believe she's here. Please stand. Thank you. Sharon Lynn, 3L at Georgetown University Law Center, and Wayne Conner, Sharon's here, great, and Wayne Conner, 3L at Loyola Law School in New Orleans. These four soon-to-be attorneys were extremely helpful to me, my legal advisors, and the rest of the staff. They provided research, proofreading, drafting, reporting, monitoring, and editorial support and comic relief, and approached their work with eagerness, earnestness, and a youthful energy that few can match. They instantly became immersed in the ebb and flow of my office rhythms, which, though some of you, the chair and the rest could tell you, could be a little on and off sync at times, and provided well-researched briefing sheets and backgrounders, not only on communications policy, but also on the culinary quality of every single food truck that was on 12th Street. They provided us with several memorable moments, which for the record show remain shrouded in the closed-door mysteries of the eighth floor folklore. And I know you can personally attest to this, Mr. Chairman, since you are a willing participant. I can't believe it. It is a telling sign when your law clerks can successfully navigate the 8th floor and snap selfies with more than a quorum of commissioners. I still can't believe you did that. But anyway, in all seriousness, I want to publicly thank these four individuals for their competence, their character, and unique contributions to the office and to this agency. They will forever remain a part of the Clyburn FCC extended family, and I wish each of them success and Godspeed in their personal and professional lives. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else have any announcements? Commissioner Pai.
So no announcements as such, but I did want to take a second to thank a few folks in the agency. As most people know, or should know at least, the heavy lifting at this building is done by the FCC's indefatigable staff. One of the things that I've noticed since taking this job is that a lot of people around the country will just email me or all five of us together and say, I've got a problem with this or that. And I'm probably, I err too much on the side of badgering our staff with a lot of these inquiries. And I just wanted to recognize a few folks who in the past couple of weeks have responded to some of these inquiries that I've forwarded to them in really a terrific way. Becky Williams and Terry Fischel in WTB's Mobility Division. I got a question about a general radio telephone operator license, where can I get a copy of it, when does it expire, et cetera. I had no idea how to handle it, but the two of them were fantastic. They were responsive, and they provided such good public service to this person that I'm quite sure that our reputation is going to be burnished by it. Peter Doyle and Lisa Scanlon in the Media Bureau's Audio Division, I can't tell you how many questions I forward to them, and they always respond with an emoji, I guess you'd say, a smiley face emoji. But recently they got a question from a guy who wanted to apply for an FM/AM radio station license in the Seattle area to serve the East Indian population there. Thank you, Lisa and Peter, for all the work you did on that. And last but certainly not least, David Seal. 30 years of service to the commission, even longer service to the country. We're so grateful to your efforts. And just as Chevron, which turns 30 years this old, gives us a lot of deference, we owe you a lot of deference when it comes to your expertise. So thanks to all the FCC staff. We up here sometimes get too much of the credit, but the real credit really belongs to the folks who work very hard every single day in this building. So thanks.
Great point, Commissioner Pai. And only you could draw the relationship between Chevron and David's service, although he does have those chevrons on his sleeve, doesn't he?
Yeah, very nice. Nicely done.
I would like to also recognize our clerks and interns who will be leaving us as of today as well. Jeff Shaw, where's Jeff? Jeff over there, stand up, Jeff. Jeff worked on today's text to 911 item all the way from development and the drafting stage to today's vote. He helped our legal advisor, Daniel Alvarez, on a multiple wireline topics. He is a thoughtful, diligent guy. When I met with the CIO of the Defense Department to talk about Spectrum, I wanted to make sure that Jeff was there because Jeff has used Spectrum on the battlefield, which is something that too few of us can say that we have done. And he will now be returning to the University of Maryland for his second year. We wish you all the best, Jeff. Brad Rivera is also parting with us today. He's helped Diane Cornell on the process reform initiative, one result of which you saw today in the tower item. He was very much involved in last month's E-rate item. A little secret about Brad is that I hired Brad to come in and be a clerk even before I was confirmed on the commission. Now that's probably some kind of an impeachable offense, but we could ask our general counsel. That's right. But Brad was very much involved in helping in transition issues as I was on my way in, and I'm very grateful to him. I was so impressed then that we talked about him coming back. He'll be returning to the University of Colorado Law School for his last year. Brad, thank you for everything, sir. And Regina Black, we're going to say hello to, but not goodbye to. Regina, you will recall, is from The Ohio State University. And she's going to be staying with us a while longer. She has worked closely in our office with Gigi Sohn. I can't even pronounce Gigi's name. With Gigi Sohn. She's also done a lot of work with the OLA folks, preparing briefings for many members of the staff, including myself. And outreach to various groups, including on the open internet. So guys, we'll miss seeing you next week and beyond. Regina, we're ready to have you back in action, and thank you. But I had the privilege of meeting with all of the FCC interns over the last couple of weeks. And what a great program this is, and the opportunities that the opportunities it provides and the doors that it opens are wonderful. And to all my colleagues, thank you and congratulations for your involvement, and to all the bureaus where there's so much action with so many clerks and interns. Are there any other items that should come before us today? If not, Madam Secretary, will you tell us about the next meeting, please?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Friday, September 19th, 2014.
Until then, the meeting's adjourned. Everybody have a good summer. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody, thanks for sticking around. We'll get started in just a couple of seconds. As a reminder, if you have specific questions about the agenda items, there will be conversations after this available with the Bureau staff to take your specific questions. And with that, I will turn it over to the chairman.
Thank you. But if anybody wants to leave, and you don't have to stick around. I mean, it's. I've got a quick statement with a couple of data points for you. First, the Commission will be hosting a series of roundtables as a part of our open internet proceeding. As many of you know, we've already received more than 1 million comments from the public in the NPRM. And these roundtables, which will take place here in this room, will provide an opportunity for us to hear additional information, to give people the opportunity to engage in dialogue on specific points, and for us to collect additional expert testimony on important points. This afternoon, we will be releasing a public notice with more information on those roundtables, so heads up. Also, I wanted to highlight a separate public notice we issued yesterday that asks questions about updating our online public file requirements to include cable and satellite providers. As most of you know, the public files make available community-relevant information on topics like children's programming and political advertising, and in 2012, the Commission voted to require broadcasters to make this information available online rather than having to go to the station. This was part of the Commission's work to harness the power of digital technologies to enhance transparency and make public information actually accessible to the public. Yesterday's public notice seeks comment on expanding this transparency and ensuring parity between broadcasters and cable and satellite programmers. With that, I look forward to your questions. Paul.
You had some strong words earlier this year in the Text to 911 proceeding about PSAPs and whether they've stepped up to do what they need to do to be able to receive texts. David Simpson gave us kind of the update on how many PSAPs and how many states. I wanted to get your view on, since that point earlier this year, have they still not done enough? Have they listened to you? Let's ask it that way.
So I think that there are that the number has increased. The indication that additional ones are planned is forthcoming. The message that I tried to deliver today is that it takes two to tango. We're doing our part. The industry is doing its part, and the PSAPs need to be able to do it. And I guess one of the things that I tried to be clear about today was to specifically direct my comments not necessarily to PSAPs, but to those who pay for the PSAPs, and to say, hey, this is a funding allocation question that needs to be handled.
So state and locals.
Yeah, that's who funds them.
Hi,
Yes.
Julian Haddam with The Hill, thanks.
Hey, Julian.
About net neutrality, the president was asked about this earlier this week. He didn't specifically refer to the proposal of the open internet work that you guys are doing, but he said, quote, you don't want to start getting a differentiation in how accessible the internet is to various users. I guess how does that square with what you guys have proposed, and is that not a call for a ban on paid prioritization?
Well, as you know, I'm sure, as I've testified before Congress, as I've said innumerable times here, anything that interferes with the virtuous cycle is something that can and should be prohibited. I have said that prioritization, in my opinion, interferes with the virtuous cycle. But let me be really clear. If prioritization hurts consumers, hurts innovation, hurts competition, degrades service, it's DOA.
So both you and the President agree that you would not like the idea of paid prioritization. Yet your proposal could sanction the practice. I'm wondering why you think the Section 706 route is the best way to ensure an open internet.
So, again, what we did in the NPRM was to say, here are some thoughts, and here are a whole bunch of other issues that also have to be addressed before you reach a final conclusion. I've told you where I stand on prioritization. If prioritization hurts the virtuous cycle, it should not be permitted, period. Elena.
Hi, Alina Seljuk-Reuters. A lot has been said today and in recent months about the growing reliance of consumers on the wireless networks. Studies have shown that for a lot of folks, wireless is the primary access to broadband. Do you think it is fair and appropriate to distinguish between wired and wireless networks when it comes to very broad and basic principles of non-discrimination and no blocking of web content?
Are you talking specifically about the Open Internet rules?
Well, that's what I'm thinking
that's
of.
Where
However,
no blocking,
I know
that's where no
that
blocking comes up, right?
Right. So when it comes to the basic principle of net neutrality, do you think it's fair and appropriate to distinguish between the two?
That's one of the issues that we asked in our NPRM, and that's one of the questions that we'll be deciding. Brian.
Hi, Brian Fung from the Washington Post. Verizon's response to your letter on data throttling laid out why it thought that its practices were reasonable and cited a number of other companies that did virtually the same thing. Have you had a chance to review that letter, and what is your sort of thinking in response
absolutely.
to that?
I've reviewed the letter. All the kids do it was never something that worked with me when I was growing up, and it didn't work with my kids. And I think what we have to be careful about is an attempt to reframe the issue around this fact that, well, everybody does something to manage their network. I think there are three issues that are here. One issue is what exactly is reasonable network management. Reasonable network management is a technology determination. It's an engineering determination. And my concern in this instance, and it's not just with Verizon, by the way, we've written to all the carriers, but my concern in this instance is that it is moving from technology and engineering issues into business issues. Business issues such as choosing between different subscribers based on your economic relationship with them. The decision that Verizon made, or the announcement Verizon made in 2012, when they said that we're not going to have unlimited anymore as a new offering, but there's 1 million or so people who continue on unlimited, was, hey, you can continue on unlimited, but we're not going to subsidize your phone. So you pay us the $6.95 or whatever the full price of the phone is, and you can keep using unlimited. Well, you can't just then turn around and say, oh, but we're not going to allow you to use unlimited anymore. So I think there's a business. So first the question is, what's reasonable network management? I think that's technology and engineering, not business. Second is the business issue. And the third is the C-block issue, in which C-block said you may not block, degrade, or interfere. And all of those issues, I think, we have to look at. And all of those issues, with the exception of C-block, apply to all the kids.
Setting the C-block issue aside for just a second, is the implication here that if Verizon expanded its program to include not just the folks on unlimited data, but also the folks on metered plans, that would be reasonable to you?
So, Brian, we're not going to sit here and hypothesize and make rules or decisions on the fly. Okay? Nice try. Sir.
Mr. Chairman, respecting everything that you just said about net neutrality, given the concerns that have been raised, are you contemplating any substantive changes to your net neutrality proposal, or is it your expectation that the proposal would remain largely the same?
Stay tuned.
Can you clarify that a little bit?
That's what the process is all about. We put out a notice of proposed rulemaking in which we say, so let's back up. One of the things that we said early on when I first came in is that we want henceforth NPRMs to go out with a rebuttable presumption in them that says, this is the idea we want you to focus on. Too often commission NPRMs said, hey, tell us what you think. And you get back a mishmash. I would say that we have been entirely successful in meeting our goal of saying, folks, this is what we want you to focus on. At the same point in time, we said, and here are all of the other issues. Because those issues will go into informing what the final order looks like. And that's the way this process works.
But are you leaving the door open to possible substantive changes?
I have answered the question and told you that what we do is propose an idea to say it's a rebuttable presumption, go rebut it. Here are a bunch of other things you ought to consider as well. Clearly people have responded. We will take all of that into account and go from there. Sir.
Rob Margetta, Congressional Quarterly. When it comes to prioritization not hurting consumers, not hurting competition, is there any thought towards providing concrete examples about what the limits of those principles would be, or at this point are you thinking about using precedent from enforcement actions?
Again, I think you got to wait and see what the order says. Todd.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Todd Shields, Bloomberg News. On July 29, you wrote to Time Warner Cable and expressed concern about the situation with the Dodgers games in Los Angeles, and some concerns about vertically integrated cable companies. Do these concerns you express about the Time Warner Cable situation in Los Angeles extend to the Comcast merger, the Comcast purchase of Time Warner Cable? To what extent will that affect your review of the merger?
Clearly, the whole question of what is the integration in the cable industry is relevant to what goes on in the Comcast merger.
Will you put conditions on the merger to prevent things like we're seeing in Los Angeles now?
Do you want me to go back? I can talk about this. Come on, Todd.
Got to try.
Brooks.
Brooks Bullock, Politico. A 911 question. Saturday, I witnessed an accident where a car wiped out 2 motorcycle riders. It took me 5 tries to get through the 911. Is that acceptable?
I would find that very frustrating and very unacceptable. The challenge is when you're in an emergency, the call needs to go through. Can you tell me more about your experience?
You want me to tell you now, or you want to talk about it a little bit offline? I'm happy to talk.
Let's talk about it offline.
So I'm just dying of curiosity, but Kim won't let me ask.
Hang around after Brooks. Nancy, did you have a question?
Oh, honey, sorry. It's okay, Nancy. My questions up here, my answers, I haven't thought them through. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the issues that keeps getting brought up in the whole net neutrality debate. The so-called two-sided market kind of an example. So yes, that is something that we have looked at and have considered and will be addressing.
It'll be addressed in the part of the rule?
Well, I think that you'll be able to see a response to the kinds of questions you ask in the rule. Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Great.
So the bureaus will be available for questions. Are there questions regarding the tower, the wireless tower issue? Yes. Okay, we have one. So I guess wireless, you're up.
So Brooks, did the guys live? Did they live?
I think you're it.
Okay, well, it was just regarding the amount of money that was talked about and how much would be saved for companies. I think Commissioner Pai said it costs. I think Commissioner Pai said one company spent about $9 million in 2007. Is that price indicative of the overall, of the average cost for companies per year for these inspections, or is that just an outlier?
I don't think that was an annual number. I think that was over several years. It was estimated that it cost, I think it was American Tower.
Yeah, that's
It was
correct.
filed in the record publicly that they spent that much over I don't remember how many years it was. Was it?
Since 2000.
Since 2007. They spent that much.
2007.
Yeah,
Okay.
just one company.
In that case, how much is the predicted amount that companies will save on average per year?
It's hard for us to say exactly what the amount will be, but if American Tower is an example, it's a significant amount of savings.
Okay.
Their numbers are representative of what industry is spending.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Not for the
Okay.
for the other.
Okay, thank you. And now for the 911 item, please.
The language that was added kind of in the last minute that Clyburn referred to, as well as PI. Some of it deals with looking at, does it ask the CISRIC to look at and see if consolidation of PSAPs would basically allow more efficient 911 delivery? And then can you tell me what else that language asks, since we don't have the item yet?
Yeah, we felt that the CISRIC would be too narrow a form really to address the question. So the item actually pulls from the currently constituted CISRIC and asks the CISRIC to then work with stakeholders from states, local, tribal, and other 911 stakeholders to come together in a task force that will address how do we bring more efficiencies into the 911 ecosystem. And we felt that the CISRIC itself wasn't the appropriate vehicle. Because that came in very, very late in the process, I believe that we will put more meat on the bones, so to speak, on it, how we'll charter that task force as a FACA and pull this together.
And then is it correct it also asks or seeks questions or asks them to look into whether a state that diverts 911 funds should be ineligible from participating in FCC working groups, councils, and other types of forum? Is that right?
Well, the purpose of the group will not be to look at the resourcing piece. It will be more technical and look at how do we bring in reduced variation across the facilities and the systems that are out there while preserving the great value that local PSAPs bring to their local communities.
So the second part then, is that just a question that the FCC is asking in the further notice?
Yeah, it's part of the order. The order designates the creation of the task force.
Okay, and then the issue of folks being eligible, they divert funds, is that something that's just asked in the further notice? Should we do this in the future? Because Clyburn made a reference to that, and obviously it's a bit cryptic for the listener, so I'm just trying to understand where that piece fits into that language that was added kind of late.
David, do you have any more on that?
Yeah, Paul, that is a question that is assigned to the task force, and that's the point on which Commissioner Clyburn dissented.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I kind of know what interconnected providers are, but most people don't know what interconnected providers are. So kind of can you kind of walk through that just a little bit so that people can get a better understanding of exactly what we're talking about? And in the further notice, are you looking at like apps like Facebook or something like that where you have text capability? Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Sure. Let me help try to put it in a vernacular. Basically, if you can put in a 7-digit phone number into that app uses something called the North American Numbering Plan. If you've built an app that leverages the North American Numbering Plan, then that app should be able to support the most important number in that numbering plan, which is 911. And today, the apps, many of the texting apps that utilize that numbering plan will not support that one number. So the interconnected over-the-top application piece brings that group into the fold. That does not address the kinds of text applications which don't directly leverage that numbering plan for an interface to the CMRS platforms. Those closed networks that are just IP are a part of the further notice.
Commissioner Pai mentioned it at AT&T, have talked about it, that the worry is that they'll have to maintain the SMS network. Is that true, or at some point does the SMS network go away?
The onus is on the over-the-top applications to ensure that they can support that functionality of 911. How they do that, if they're dependent on the carrier's SMS platform and the carriers evolve away from that, it will be up to the interconnected over-the-top provider to either take on that SMS responsibility themselves or work with the carriers on what the carriers migrate to or develop their own direct connection. It does not tie the carriers in any way to preserve SMS forever.
Just one more thing. The further notice, does it look at non-interconnected providers? Do you look at that in the further notice?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Ann Kim from CQ Roll Call. Can you give a couple concrete examples of what the text to 911 rule what apps the rule would cover and not cover? I mean, when are we talking about iMessage? Is that covered? Is WhatsApp covered? Just so people can get a concrete understanding.
I think Tim is probably the best, our Mr. Matrix here.
I hate to name names, but so Apple Messages really has two functionalities. In the first instance, you can send iPhone to iPhone. That's the so-called blue screen. You'll notice sometimes you have a green screen. That means that your text went over some other network other than Apple's dedicated iPhone to iPhone message. So it's sort of baked in. So if you have an app, I'll mention Haywire. Haywire file comments in our proceeding. Haywire is a major over-the-top provider. I think they send 1 billion plus messages a month. Right now, they currently route text using IP. If they choose to use the CMRS-based model to handle text to 911, then they will access the underlying SMS network of the end user's device if they choose to go that route. So most of that right now is more or less baked in to the application itself. But the key thing with Haywire is they provide you with a phone number, so therefore they're within the definition of a covered text provider. So it's that two-way texting back and forth to a number that's based off the NAMP. Does that get to your...
Maybe more information than she was looking for.
Yeah, and we could, can we provide the matrix at some point? We believe that's an important question, that we'd be able to show what apps are impacted by this and what aren't, and we'll take that as an action to make that available. Okay. Yeah. The important thing, though, is that this item actually addresses the universe of those, right? So the interconnected are in the order. Those that aren't are in the further notice. So this does not create a confusion that we'll never get to those. This is about the incremental delivery of this capability, and I've got significant experience in DoD of helping to bring to fruition pretty complicated weapon systems with a lot of different stakeholders. Admiral Wayne Myers, who's the father of Aegis, told us early on, build a little, test a little, learn a lot. We've built a little in text to 911. We've learned a whole lot from those early implementations. It's already showing value. The best way to reduce risk in this high impact, important to Americans area is to do this in an iterative fashion, which adds capability, adds functionality, but reduces risk as we go forward.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.